This story is about a young man who desperately fought for his life. His whole life is an obstacle course that he tried to overcome. It seemed to him that he had already been able to do it, but one piece of news destroyed all expectations. Up to this point, he would never have thought it was possible. All his dreams, joys and expectations collapsed after one short conversation with a man in a white coat. Previously, he lived like any normal person, but one day, death came to his soul. He desperately tried to escape death. At first she pursued his loved ones, now she has approached him. The struggle brought him to the place that changed everything forever. A world of monsters, magic and miracles. The energy that flows in it could give and take away. This place is completely different from the world in which the young man lived before. In his home world, he was the most ordinary librarian, and now he destroys ferocious monsters that are trying to harm him. They are strong and huge. What can one man do against such ferocious power? Just fight her. Strength of spirit and thirst for life lead young Inhan along a road full of difficulties and danger. He is not an ordinary person. The guy has embarked on a path that he is going to follow to the very end. In this world, he will not miss a chance, will not give in, will not allow doubts to consume his mind and soul. His weapon smashed his enemies, a tandem of strength and energy, allowing the young man to reach heights that were impossible for an ordinary person. He will certainly take this opportunity to become the real king of the books of this world. History of Inhan Kong started with a visit to the doctor. Frequent nausea haunted him, and with this complaint he went to the hospital. This visit changed everything. The guy was diagnosed with liver cancer. He did this very timely, which significantly increased the chances of recovery. The doctors could not have done anything if he had come later. From such news, the young man was in a stupor. Since the disease had not yet entered the terminal stage, he still had a chance to recover by undergoing surgery and chemotherapy. The doctor tried to cheer him up. Now cancer is not an incurable disease, of course it will not be easy. But if you get the right treatment and make some effort, you could get it. But the guy did not particularly hear the words of the doctor, he could not believe that he could die. Such news could not pass without a trace, it crippled the guy too much. In addition to his illness, he developed depression. The apartment from a cozy place turned into a cluttered room. Things were scattered everywhere. In the kitchen there was a mountain of unwashed dishes. Bottles of alcohol took up most of the free space. He never thought it would turn out like this before. But still, it happened. He tried to drown out his mental pain with drink. Every evening he got drunk while sitting in front of the TV. Life was losing all meaning every moment. He didn't understand why. Why does he have to go through this? He never did anything wrong and always worked hard. His father died from cancer of the stomach and now he has cancer too. It was already too much for him. He spent all his savings on his father's medical bills, and his mother died in a car accident. And finally, when the guy began to settle down and earn his living, cancer overtook him too. He didn't want to die like that, he just didn't believe in it. Inhan firmly decided that he would live and fight by any means. Despite your desperate situation, you need to cure cancer and stay alive. One day, the guy came to work for the last time to put a letter of resignation on the boss's desk. The boss asked him not to worry too much about it. They need such talented librarians as Inhan. He is very smart, responsible and knows his stuff well. The boss wished him recovery and a speedy return. He thanked his boss for his words of encouragement. After which he went to his workplace to pack his things. He put everything in a box. The guy's face did not look like someone who was going to fight the disease. He didn't seem to think about anything at all, but just resigned himself. At this time, someone called him. Behind him stood his colleagues. A young girl wanted to hand him an envelope. The guy was wondering what it was. He clearly didn't expect something like this. All employees donated money to him for treatment. Of course, for him it might seem too much, but still they wanted to help. The girl wished him a speedy recovery, promising to see him at work soon. Each of them wanted to wish him the best. Support is just as important to a person as medication, they understood that. These words touched the guy very much. It was very difficult for him to hold back his tears. He began to cry. Tears fell on the envelope, except for the guys at work. No one said anything like that to him. The young man calmed down a bit and thanked the guys for their help and support. He wanted to get back to them as soon as possible. After a while, the guy was holding a piece of his hair in his hands. Chemotherapy made itself felt, his hair began to fall out. He looked at this scrap in his palm and despair seized him. He felt that hospital treatment was not helping. He understood that at this rate he would definitely die, it was only a matter of time. Doctors will use him as a guinea pig to administer experimental drugs until he is gone. Being completely depressed, Yunosha decided to visit the temple. At this time, a service was taking place, at which the priest insisted that their illnesses were not illnesses of the flesh. These are the diseases of the soul caused by their unbelief. If they want to be saved, His Holiness can heal their sick souls. Oh, we must believe and pray, this is the only way to be saved. Pray for your life. But you need to prove your faith and devotion with donations. The guy desperately prayed, asked to help him. He asked for healing, the treatment did not help, his only hope was God. Life is all he needed. In return for her, the guy promised to repay everything that he has. He stood in front of the mirror, his body too thin and weak to support the fight. Neither prayer nor treatment helped him. He couldn't cure cancer like that. He was overcome with anger at such a hopeless situation. Time passed and winter came. The guy was lying on the couch, his condition left much to be desired. Various thoughts swirled in my head. He thought that if he died, he would no longer be able to read books, who loves. But after all, if it doesn't exist, then what's the point in reading and learning something? These thoughts haunted him. The guy turned over on his side, he wanted to remember if he had ever read books about cancer before. And then one thought visited him, he remembered, read about meditation. Inhan jumped up from the sofa. Somewhere there was a book that said about a man who cured cancer with the help of this art. I think it was called On Learning and Meditation. He should try, maybe this way will help him. Time passed, after reading many books, he began to study it. Nothing happened at first. But after a month of training, he was able to feel his K and his posture seemed peaceful, he was able to cast aside all thoughts and be in harmony with the body and surroundings. To diligent studies, after 3 months he felt his K and moves inside the body. It was significant progress, but from these books, there was little he could learn on his own. At that moment, all the money had already run out. He had no other choice, and decided to sell the house. Then move to a professional training center. There he will definitely be able to learn much more than in books. In this place they tried to help him in different ways. It wasn't like traditional medicine. However, the young man used every opportunity. He continued to study literature, meditate, study hard every day. But all these methods did not give much effect. Although he felt a little better. The territory of the center overlooked the coast, overlooking the sea and mountains. He often walked around these places, watching the beautiful landscapes that could be seen from the high ground. Meditation was his last hope, but it did little to improve his health. He didn't want to die like that, he wanted to live. The boy was barely holding back his tears. One old man approached him and decided to give advice. Life is just one of the clouds in the sky, the dispersal of this cloud is its death. Clouds cannot be grasped by human hands, just as life and death cannot be controlled. You need to let go of your thirst for life, only then can he find peace. These words clearly did not make him feel any better. The man only angered him. He jumped up from his seat, starting to shout at him. Is it bad that such a young man wants to live? Even animals value their lives. It was not worth it to treat other people's problems so carelessly. The guy did not continue the conversation and just ran away. The old man was only trying to justify himself, that he meant something completely different. In a hurry, he gathered his things and decided that he had to get out of here. We need to find a place where he can get the best energy. All his things fit into a small backpack. He walked along one of the mountain paths. He became ill, his mind clouded. Everything floated before my eyes. He began to wobble from side to side. He could barely lean on the tree. This has never happened to him before. The guy didn't know what was wrong. Perhaps that moment has come. But the attacks continued, interrupting his thoughts. At one point, he could not keep his balance and stumbled. His foot slipped, and the guy fell off a high cliff, falling down at great speed. He fell right into the water. She pulled him deeper and deeper. He didn't move, didn't make any attempt to climb up. There was only one thought in his head: is this really the end? After so much suffering, fighting for life, will it all end like this? He didn't think it was such a bad idea. Be absorbed in water. Instead of living in constant pain. He did not want to suffer anymore, all hopes were completely dispelled. There was a light wind on the surface, small waves beat against the shore. And just at this place the body of a young man was thrown out. He quickly plunged under the water, and now he was at the top. His hand began to tremble. Did he somehow manage to survive? He managed to come to his senses and tried to raise his head. His eyes opened. It was clear from the look that he was not happy with what was happening. The guy had lost all hope, and now he couldn't even die on his own terms. These thoughts were soon discarded. He wanted to look around to understand where he was and go on his way, since he managed to survive. In front of him he saw a dense forest with tall trees. A little further behind him are high mountains that were not like anything he had seen before. He became alert, not understanding what kind of terrain it was. And where is it located? Around were mountains, forests, a river, and a lake. Not a single building or town. Inhan decided not to sit still, but to walk through the forest. It is hardly worth waiting for someone to help. That mountain was not at all like Mount Gyeongsan. The area itself did not resemble Korea at all. But how is this possible? The more he thought about it, the more worried he became. He had to remain calm, to pull himself together and understand what had happened. The guy continued to walk along the wide forest road, thinking about what was happening. There was definitely a waterfall where he fell, but he woke up in a completely different place. It reminded him of a novel he recently read. The protagonist woke up in an unknown place. He struggled with all his might to stay alive. Maybe he also found himself in a similar situation. The guy was making his way through this big dense forest. The road was littered with old trees, and he had to pass under them. Could he get to another world through water? Such a thought came to him, although it seemed like a sick fantasy. Needing some rest, he opened his backpack to see if he had anything useful with him. He found a spare set of clothes. There were few things, but better than nothing at all. A small cooking set, a knife, a flashlight, containers with a combustible substance and a first aid kit. Sleeping bag with tent. They will come in very handy in a place like this. And some food for the first time. Canned food and instant kits, they last a long time and can be stretched for a long time. That's all he had about. His clothes were still wet, and the guy started to get cold. You have to kindle a fire. He found a lighter in his backpack, but it didn't work. After checking, he was convinced that the ignition was dry enough. Maybe it's broken? After checking the burner, he found out that it was also not working. It seemed a little strange. If he doesn't have fire in this forest, he will die. You need to remember what was written in the book on survival, which he once read. The hero remembered that he had read what a tool for lighting a fire in the forest looks like. It has been used since ancient times, when getting fire was quite a difficult task. A little effort and everything was ready. He would never even have thought that an extra set of laces could be useful. Having finished with everything necessary, he installed his weapon. You just need to rub and you can make fire. Several minutes passed, but nothing happened. The guy was at a loss, but continued to try. The end of the stick rubbed against the log, he tried his best. Everything seemed easier in the book, why is it so difficult? He stopped briefly to rest. Beads of sweat appeared on his face. He went on and on. Despite their best efforts, not even a bit of smoke could be seen. He was in pain, but he had to be patient. Soon, the pain became too much. I had to stop again. He looked at his hand, his palm was completely rubbed. But that didn't mean he was giving up. Inhan treated the wound and used a bandage to bandage it. The fire must be kindled at all costs. His life depended on it. And after a little time, coals appeared and he managed to set fire to a small handful of grass. He immediately took it in his hands and tried to fan the flames. The guy was glad that he finally did it. Now at least he won't freeze. The night has come. The guy made improvised clothes dryers, placing them near the fire. He also pitched a tent. He himself tried to warm up, covering himself with a blanket. What kind of area is this? Did he really end up in another world? These thoughts did not leave my head. He couldn't even start a fire without hurting his hands. At this rate, things could turn out very sadly for him. At dawn, he decided to find high ground to explore the surroundings. This way he could get at least a general idea of where he was. In the distance he heard a scream that interrupted his thoughts. The guy jumped up, looking in that direction. What was it? An oak? But it doesn't sound like a wolf howl. He heard a woman scream. This completely baffled him. What was he supposed to do? This is all not good. A large green hand held a woman by the hair. She screamed and cried as she held onto the monster's hand to ease the pain a little. Orc-like creature with green skin and huge fangs. It dragged the unfortunate girl somewhere. She tried to say something, but her language was unintelligible. The girl was bleeding. It's hard to even imagine what this monster did to her. The guy decided to approach carefully to that place. He watched this picture with horror. Now he was finally convinced that he was in another world. From what he saw, Inhan was horrified. And what to do? If nothing is done, this woman may die. However, if you go against this monster alone, then it will simply be smeared. The situation seemed hopeless. He could only watch what was happening. OPK didn't let her go, the girl couldn't help it. She tried to scratch his hand to somehow escape. This pissed off the monster. He swung his big club. His face was filled with rage and malice. The blow was of such violent force that the blood of the unfortunate splattered several meters. Then he looked to the side. Something clearly alarmed the orc. It looks like he was able to feel the presence of the guy. He barely managed to hide behind a rock. The boy was terrified, he almost gave away his location. If the orc will catch him, just kill him. Soon the monster turned away, it seems that he did not notice him. He left that girl and went his own way as if nothing had happened. Realizing that there was no longer a threat, the young man left the shelter and approached the place where that monster had recently stood. The guy looked at the lifeless, bloodied body of a woman. He failed to save her. He was too weak for that. Inhan couldn't leave her like this. He buried her and made a small grave, collecting a small mound of stones and putting up a cross. The guy asked for forgiveness for what he could not save. The only thing he could do was pray that the girl would find peace. He tried to figure out what to do next, because if he stays here, the monster might attack him too. A noise behind him caught his attention. Had the orc come back and found him? The young man turned around. A huge creature resembling a panther crept up to him. She gazed at him intently. Her growl indicated that she was about to attack. He was seized with horror and despair. He couldn't move, they just stood and looked at each other. The animal did not look away for a second. Thoughts flashed through my head one after another. Should he run? Of course not, the animal will catch him in no time. He was so afraid that he couldn't even move. A shiver ran through my whole body from head to toe. The guy saw black panthers in a documentary. But why was it so huge? It is at least twice as big as what he saw on TV. Hesitating, he stepped on a branch. And this frightened him even more because the sound will attract attention. Oh, but the panther was no longer looking at him. It was a no-win situation, he couldn't escape and he couldn't fight. Is it really going to end like this? The guy looked away. Another animal appeared from behind the bushes. In some way, he was reminiscent of a zebra, only with 2 horns and larger sizes. Seeing larger prey, the panther immediately pounced on it. The guy started screaming, covering his face with his hands. It seemed to him that the animal attacked him. With its fangs, the panther clung to the throat of its prey. She didn't even have time to move. The predator looked at the frightened guy. He slowly opened his eyes, realizing that he was fine. The beast did not touch him. Started to run away screaming. Inhan ran as far as possible from that place while the predator was enjoying his dinner. Looking around to see if they are following him, without even thinking to stop. He was sure that if he became at least for a short time, then he, too, would be eaten. After running for quite a long time, the guy got tired. It looks like he's been busy all night, it's already getting light outside. He was very short of breath and stopped to rest. Without knowing how much distance he covered, he started to feel sick. Either from great physical exertion, or from what he saw. The guy started vomiting. Tears flowed from his eyes, he almost died. Orcs, giant panthers, deer, like animal. All these images, strange animals jumbled in his head. Is definitely not Earth. Now he is 100% sure of it. He sat down under a tree and tried to think about what was happening. Now that he thought about it, even if he tried his best to survive, it seemed like it would be useless. He has cancer and now that he has come into this world, sooner or later he will die from the inability to receive any treatment. But despite this, he will never give up his life again. Dawn came. Inhan returned to the camp and rested from what had happened. The fire had long since died out, he slept in a tent, climbing into a sleeping bag. Soon he woke up. His face was too pale. He froze, even though he had a bag and a tent, the night in the forest was very cold, and his body was weakened by the disease. Perhaps it will be possible to warm you up if you collect ki in the abdominal cavity. So he can prevent a drop in body temperature. The boy chose a comfortable place and began to meditate. He was able to concentrate, ignoring all external factors. Suddenly he noticed something strange. Previously unfamiliar feelings, he could collect a huge amount of K and in his body. Until now, whenever it took in K and, the cancer cells took most of it. But now, after a bit of meditation, he can feel the Ki gathering in his belly. Ki opens and connects points within the body as it moves down the spine. before he finally pierces the K-point and at the base of the spine. No matter how hard he tried, it was impossible before, but now he could do it so easily. Oh, how is that possible? After K and pierces the base of the spine, it will dissipate and lose heat. The guy should change his breathing to the warrior method, inhale deeply and exhale slowly, then the scattered energy will again gather together with warmth. Time passed. He continued to meditate, collecting energy and gaining strength little by little. The little forest dwellers were watching him. On his shoulders. And other animals, but he didn't care. They were not a threat to him, nor was he to them. There was an atmosphere of peace and unity with nature in the air. His initial K and completed a small circle and turned into a real K and the body warms up. It was incredible if you keep up the good work. Then he can cure cancer. Now it seemed quite real. The disease that was slowly eating him away could now be destroyed. Several weeks passed, the guy came to the lake. Decide in a little dip. He stood waist-deep in water, washing himself. During this time, his body has completely changed about the axis. He was no longer a skinny boy. Each muscle became larger and gained relief. It has only been a few weeks since he began to train this body by eating fruit and fish. It recovered so much that he began to seriously build muscle. His hair began to grow and the pain slowly disappeared. This is proof that the liver is recovering. The cancer cells may already be dying. The body now has much more strength to fight for life. Moreover, his vision improved significantly, as if he had attached telescopes to his eyes. He could see even a small flower in the distance in as much detail as possible. His eyes gained the ability and became like the zoom of a video camera. With their help, he can see a small bee a couple of tens of meters away from him. These abilities are amazing. He had never even thought about this before. Now that he has finished washing, it is necessary to continue training K and coming out of the water, something caught his attention. He leaned down to take a closer look at these large dents in the ground. It turned out to be a big paw print. Realizing that this is a beast, he was not much on his guard. During the last meeting, he was lucky to escape, but did not want everything to happen again. Soon the guy returned to his camp. There was some bad news waiting for him. His things were scattered. The tent has been torn down. Had the beast tracked him down? It seemed to him that he had avoided him until now. Body recovered well, the guy was able to build up some muscles. But this does not mean that he can fight this beast with his bare hands. You need to get a weapon, then there will be a chance to win. Close combat with such a beast should be avoided, so a spear is not suitable. So you need a ranged weapon. Maybe an onion would do? No, this may not work either. The bow is too difficult to make with the tools and skills it had. And mastering this weapon alone will take too much time. A compact and portable weapon is needed, which is easy to do. He was visited by one thought. He remembered one of the variants of the weapon he needed. And what if this is a sling? An image of an ancient warrior using this uncomplicated device appeared in his head. The kid saw it on the internet. This weapon has incredible destructive power, using centrifugal force. It is very easy to make, and the weapon has incredible attack power. This is a primitive weapon, but also quite effective. If controlled properly, he would be able to easily defeat the Black Panther. He remembered the story of David and Goliath. Besides, it is not entirely groundless. Necessary try to make it from the materials you can find in your inventory. He had a needle and thread in his supply, so it would be possible to make him strong. It's bad that you have to cut the backpack, but there's nothing to be done. This fabric is the most durable of all that he had. __. The hem still need to be sewn on, so that the fabric does not wear out. The guy tested it for strength. The sling withstood the force of its tension. He wasn't sure he'd done it right, but the weapon seemed solid enough. Shouldn't be a problem since he's hemmed the edges. Now all that was left was to check. He found a suitable stone, more or less round in shape. Now it needs to be put on the fabric. One end of the lace must be tied to form a loop and put on your finger. The second end must be held freely in your hand in order to release it in time. After that, spin the weapon above your head. While everything was going well, he was about to hit the tree. The distance is about 20 meters. It is necessary to keep a distance from the beast if it wants to stay alive. At the right moment, he releases one end of the rope. And the projectile flew with incredibly enormous force. However, it did not hit the target. But it was close, as he thought. It is difficult to hit the target without practice. We need to try again. The guy spun the sling again. By making a throw at the right moment. And again the shell flew past. He continued to throw, but all the stones flew past the target. Need to start again. You need to release it when the speed reaches maximum. This time, he managed to hit. The stone knocked down one of the branches. A satisfied grin appeared on his face. It was already better. Now he is confident that he will be able to hit the target. He spins the weapon again, concentrating as much as possible on his target. The projectile flies out. And it hits exactly the intended target. He did it. Finally got it. Now we need to try to repeat it same thing. He will have to quickly master this weapon in order to use it in real combat. Some time passed. After the trees he moved on to moving targets. A fox caught his eye. With an accurate hit, the projectile flies right into her head. The animal did not have time to react in any way. The guy was happy with the result, approaching his target at that time. 10 days of training is finally starting to pay off. He could certainly hit a target within 1 to 20 meters. Suddenly, he felt something. This sensation alarmed him. Inhan peered into the distance, straight into the thicket of the forest. But what could be there? This is a panther. He was sure of it. He managed to see her. That same beast lay quietly on a stone among the bushes. He also felt it. The predator got up and carefully looked in the direction where the young man was standing. He was able to spot the animal due to his sharp eyesight. However, I realized that the panther also discovered it. The animal began to roar. The guy reached for another projectile. He must attack. The beast rushed at him. He quickly loaded the stone into his sling. But the beast was approaching too fast. He barely had time to spin his weapon. But the monster was already close to him. He couldn't even use his weapon. He was terrified. At the last moment, he managed to jump aside. There was no chance at that distance. Oh, just run away. He quickly began to move away from her. But she was chasing him. Will you be able to outrun this beast? At this rate, you can die without resistance. He didn't want to die running away from the enemy. He still had stones. He quickly reloaded his weapon. It was better for him to die fighting. But when he turned around, there was no one in front of him. Was he really that fast? Antara couldn't keep up with him. Maybe it's because he managed to complete a large circle of ki during meditation, the practice of slinging. He realized that he quickly gained muscle mass and became stronger. But he didn't understand how physical abilities had increased so much. Maybe the training of the internal organs also showed itself well. All these thoughts went to another plane, because the monster caught up with him. The distance was large enough. From such a distance it could be possible to hit. The panther lunged at him again. The guy spun his sling. And the shell hit with a direct hit animal directly in the eye. The force of the throw was so great that she was thrown to the side. And she fell to the ground. Inhan looked at the monster with interest and surprise. Did you really manage to hurt him? Trembling, Panther was able to get up. And he began to run away from him. He thought he attacked too weakly. It was impossible to miss the animal, you need to finish it off. The body is so light. He pursued the panther only with his physical strength. Finally, he felt how much his health had been restored and how incredibly his physical abilities had increased. The cancer should soon disappear completely. He almost managed to catch up with the beast. This time he was going to finish him off. But something unexpectedly pierced the animal's back. He fell to the ground dead. Sticking out of his back a spear. Who could it be? Someone began to approach the guy. Orcs appeared from behind the bushes. He was not a little scared. The two orcs growled, about to attack. These were the monsters he wanted to avoid the most. One of them took a spear from the panther's back. He didn't know what to do. To run, or is it better to fight against two? The guy decided to avoid the fight with them as far as possible and run away. But suddenly, another orc appeared, in his hands. There was a wounded girl. It seems she was still alive. He remembered that unfortunate woman whom he could not save the last time. If he runs away, this woman will die just like her. The guy decided he couldn't run away. Now everything was different, he became stronger than before. He could have saved this woman. Should have done it. It will be difficult if the orcs attack right after the first attack. In that case, he had a good idea. The projectile flew straight towards the third monster. It hit him in the shoulder. And then he let the girl out of his hands. The guy quickly picked her up and ran away with her in his arms. It would be suicidal to meet these three face to face. If he wants to save this woman, he must first get her out of here. Even if he fights them, you will have to take them one by one and destroy them. Ahead, he bumped into three more. They immediately noticed him. There were too many of them and the guy couldn't use the sling. But what to do? He couldn't with to fight them, so he had no other choice. Orcs are about to attack. Inhan began to run towards them. He accelerated as fast as he could. And jumping up, he bounced off the spear of one of them. Then he pushed away from his face. And jumped to great heights. Landing on a tree branch. So high, holding someone in your arms. He couldn't believe it was real. In any case, you need to get out of this place. Until there are no more of them. Is it possible to overcome such a distance in a jump? He pushed off. His body became lighter every minute. He jumped from branch to branch on a large distance, holding the girl in your arms. She just looked at him shyly. They managed to get away. And they sat down to rest. He told the girl not to worry, they wouldn't be able to follow them. She must have been horrified. The boy wanted to know where she was wounded. But the girl spoke in an unknown language. He thought he couldn't understand her. She looked like she was from Eastern Europe, but he had no idea what language she spoke. The girl began to pronounce the word Madaka. Of everything she said, he could only make out this word. The guy decided that she called him that, but it was not his name and he decided to introduce himself. He called his own name. But she pronounced it wrong. The guy tried to pronounce it syllable by syllable, but she still pronounced it incorrectly. He tried again. But again failure. He realized that there was nothing to be done, after all, they spoke different languages. He allowed himself to be called Madaka and wanted to know her name. It looks like her name is Mila. He wanted to know what about the family. But she didn't understand a word, and he didn't know how to explain it. The guy tried to use gestures, pointing to the house and how to get there. But she just continued to stare at him in surprise. Then she rushed towards him. And she began to cry, talking about something. The guy was only sorry, because he did not understand what she was talking about. The girl took his hand and tried to get somewhere. From those words, the same Madaka stood out every time. It looks like she was telling him to follow her. They ran together through the whole forest. It was already starting to get dark and there was no confidence that they were going the right way. The guy noticed something in front of him. He immediately grabbed the girl, covering her mouth with his hand, making it clear that she should not make noise. By that time it was already dark. The wolves howled at the moon. It was a whole flock of oaks. There were a lot of animals. And they were on guard all the time. The guy and the girl climbed a tree. It would not be very lucky to pass them by. If these wolves attack at the same time, even the orcs won't stand a chance. You need to move as quietly as possible so that they do not notice them. Together they made their way through the high thickets. The guy was wondering how much was left to go. But the girl gave him a sign to be quiet. She showed him to bend down. They got closer. Seeing the camp, which was full of orcs, he examined them carefully. Until I saw the captured women. Those unfortunates were weeping, their hands were tied. The orcs have captured more women, the hero thought. The girl continued to say something, repeating the same word at the end. Are they her friends? Maybe they are from the same village? She must have asked to be saved. But how could he go against so many orcs? She continued to sob. Look at him with pleading eyes. He also wanted to save them. He might be able to kill one or two, but it's suicide to go against them all. Even though it's a ranged weapon, you won't be able to counter them all. The girl ran towards him again, continuing to repeat the same thing and also looking into his eyes. The guy thought. And an idea came to his head. There was another way to do this. The night was getting darker. He returned back to that flock of wolves. A stone was flying in the direction of one of them. And it hit him right in the head. The wolf dropped dead. Everyone else began to behave very aggressively. They noticed the enemy in front of them. The guy stood and watched them. And the animals rushed at him. He began to run away, thus leading them along. They tried to catch up with him. By that time, the orcs had already hidden all the captives. They heard a noise from outside. A man was rushing towards them with a pack of wolves behind him. At the right moment, the guy jumped, grabbing a branch. He climbed a tree. The wolves, noticing the orcs, rushed towards them. They prepared for battle. A flock of oaks and a detachment of orcs came together in battle. The guy watched them from above. Everything turned out just as he planned. It was a chance. No one guarded the entrance to the caves. He cautiously entered there. One of the monsters immediately attacked him. He tried to strike, but the guy dodged. And going behind him, unrolled the sling. And he struck him right in the jaw. The orc collapsed to the ground. Looks like it was the only guard. He thought for a bit as he looked at the monster. Orci are not that different from humans. The guy is here. I threw those thoughts aside. For a second it seemed to him as if he had killed a man. He walked into the dark cave, trying to find girls. And suddenly he noticed them. There were 5 of them, they were sitting on the floor. They looked at him with surprise and fear. One of them began to repeat the same word that Milla said. What, after all, did this word mean? But there was no time, it was necessary to leave quickly. The girls looked at each other warily. And they followed him. Soon they came out of the cave. And the battle was still going on. None of them had any intention of retreating. One of the orcs spotted the fugitives. They didn't want to lose hostages. But he barely had time to give a sign, when one of the wolves attacked him. It was a chance. He told the girls to follow him. It got darker and darker. Together they walked through the forest. It looks like they weren't followed anymore. The girls were still looking at him cautiously. He tried to explain to them not to worry, because he was not a bad person. And signaled Milla to come out right now. They heard Shore Ox. From the bushes showed a girl. In tears, they all rushed to her. The guy just watched it all with tenderness. It was already beginning to dawn. It seems that the guy and the others did not stop and continued walking all night. All this time Milla stayed close to him. He didn't understand what everyone was talking about, but it looked like they were going to the village. The red-haired girl looked at him. It looks like she was asking something. But the words were still incomprehensible, except for only one Medaka. But what does this word mean? The guy still couldn't understand. She spoke to another girl, quite telling something. Milla's stomach was rumbling so loudly that the guy heard the sound. She became uncomfortable. It is not surprising that she was hungry, because they had been walking for a very long time. The guy decided to look for food. He noticed fruit on one of the trees. And he told them to wait a bit until he gets everyone food. He clenched his fist. And with all his strength he hit the crown of the tree. A bunch of fruits began to fall on the ground. The girls were beside themselves with happiness. They started collecting them. Now they could at least have a bite to eat. It seems that they were all very grateful to the guy. He never thought he would use the K technique in this way, but at least everyone seemed happy. After lunch they continued on their way. Suddenly, Milla grimaced in pain. And fell to the ground. He approached her and asked what happened. He asked to show his legs. Her feet were in wounds. He did not understand why the girl did not say anything. Although they did not understand each other, but still, she could show earlier. Inhan prepared to carry her on his back. She was a little surprised, but he urged her to quickly climb onto his back. The girl was embarrassed again. He carried it on him while the others watched with interest. Milla was embarrassed all this time. The rest of the girls were discussing something among themselves. In time they spotted a village. It was a small settlement enclosed by a wooden wall and with 2 guards at the entrance. The 2 noticed that someone was approaching the village. These were the missing girls who rushed towards them. They started hugging the guards. It looks like one of them was related to them. This picture pleased the eyes of the hero and Milla. He was invited to one of the houses. He was sitting at the table. Opposite him sat a gray-haired old man. Judging by the general atmosphere, and the way the villagers behaved, this man must be an elder of villages and it must be Milla is his granddaughter, and on the right is her grandmother. In any case, the food on the table did not look very edible. But they had to work hard to prepare food for the guy, and he has to be polite and try not to show disgust. Probably, in this way they expressed their gratitude for saving the girls. He tasted the food. It was just terrible. He barely managed not to make a face. He tried to say that it was very tasty. Although he himself did not understand what it was. Even dogs won't touch this. It is said that people in ancient times made porridge from milk and oats, which was used as feed for livestock. It must be something similar. The girl was simply touched, looking at him. A little later, the guy felt bad from what he ate all this. If it weren't for the fruit he found later, he would have vomited. He decided to swim in the river. At the same time thinking about what to do next. Maybe just settle in this village. But he didn't understand what they were saying. He wondered what he could do with his abilities in this village. Lost in thought, he stood in the water and looked at his reflection. He has changed a lot since then. Gaining a lot of muscle mass. And having developed abilities beyond human ones. Everything was as he thought. It seems that the cancer is completely cured. If his liver hadn't recovered, his hormones would still be off and he wouldn't be able to gain as much muscle. He was sure that he would live. Suddenly he noticed that someone was watching him. It was Milla. She looked at him with surprise. The guy was happy to see her, asking me about the clothes she brought. But she didn't seem to hear him. Turned away in disgust. She put down the clothes she brought him. And she quickly ran away. Here the guy realized that he was completely naked. He again heard some sounds in the distance. The other girls were also watching him. As soon as he noticed them, they immediately ran away. But it didn't seem all that bad to him. It's already dark. He lay in bed thinking about something. His body was about tired and stiff, but he could not sleep. Probably because it's the first real bed he's been in since he came into this world. Suddenly, someone entered the room. He jumped up abruptly, asking who was there. Behind the door stood an embarrassed Milla in translucent clothes. He looked at her in surprise. She looked at him and repeated the same words about Medaka. The guy was embarrassed. There was an awkward silence between them. The girl threw herself into his arms. She looked into his eyes. And quietly said another Medaka. The young man believed that they should not do this. She didn't seem to care. This confused him greatly. He pushed her away from him. Trying to explain that he cannot do this, because they are not a couple. And he quickly put her outside. Milla was at a loss, but he told her to go to bed. A meeting was taking place at the local lord's castle. He was a little nervous. But with a calm face he continued to sit in place. His advisor was fussing over documents. One of them clearly interested him. The lord wondered what his servant thought. He felt it was time to make a move. Lord Vidin has been on the sidelines for a long time, but which faction should he choose? The servant handed him one of the documents, offering this faction. The lord wanted to know why she. The old man explained that the firstborn always had the strongest argument when it came to succession of power. It is better to choose the side that has reasonable claims when the forces of all factions are equal. But after all, Prince Isola was not competent. This worried the lord a little. However, the prince was not incompetent, but too good-natured. He is not the right person to rule in these difficult times, but he has a strong argument for the throne, as well as the support of the Dowager Empress. The second prince is smart and well suited to the role of ruler, but he looks down on his subordinates. The lord and his people will be betrayed after they have served their purpose. It was a valid argument for him. One of his warriors came to him, named Chiani. And he ordered him to gather knights and mercenaries. Take an overseer and go around the villages, taking into the army all men over 15 years old. Now is the time to act. The day in the village passed as usual. The peasants cultivated the land. As someone began to approach the village, the overseer was pleased that everyone was working hard. The people greeted him. And he ordered the people to be called. The peasants did not understand what was happening, because the time to pay taxes had not yet come. But it was not about taxes. He ordered to stop chatting and gather the villagers. All the inhabitants gathered and waited for the master to begin his speech. Although the emperor was blessed by the goddess of grain and life, 10 years have passed since His Majesty Charlemagne, the emperor of the great Elenial Empire, suffered from ill health due to the envious wrath of the goddess Antonimi. He cannot express his pain as he is unconscious. But only Prince Isola, the firstborn of His Majesty, is the legitimate heir to the throne. However, the other princes, seduced by the goddess, declared that they were the rightful heirs to the throne. This dispute has been going on for 5 years, it's time for them to speak their mind and take up arms. Lord Vita N and Baron Schofield are saddened by this situation and wish the peasants to take up their spears and take part in this great cause. This confused people. One of the farmers did not understand what he meant. Another peasant said that they wanted to draft them into the army. The master ordered to go to take weapons. There is no time to waste and you must hurry. People didn't like this news. They did not want to go, because they would die a dog's death. These words infuriated the overseer. He drew his sword, saying that anyone who refuses the call will be executed. People were scared and decided to follow his order, but one guy did not budge. The master looked at him. Before him stood a tall young man who did not follow his orders. Did he decide to resist? The boy tried to explain that he was not from here. From these words, the master was at a loss. One of the knights was watching the guy closely. His skin color is different and he has black hair and black eyes. Maybe he's from the north, although judging by his features, maybe he's from the east. The overseer did not like that someone reread him and he began to threaten the guy. He took out his whip. And waving it, I decided to teach him a lesson. He dodged the blow. And that pissed him off even more. But the next time, he caught his whip with his hand, pulling hard on him. And the proud lord fell to the ground. How dare he do this to him? The peasants were shocked by what they saw. The other knights drew their swords, ready to attack him. An elder ran up to them and began to beg to have mercy on the guy. He explained that this man was Madaka who came down from the mountain. The soldiers were stunned to hear this. As well as the guy. Does such a person really exist? Chiani is clearly interested in him. He ordered the knights to put away their weapons. If he is Madaka, he may not be familiar with their code of conduct. The guy is quite muscular, looks like he was trained. He is clearly not a farmer from this village. The commander asked the elder why Madoka is in the village. He explained that some time ago, the village maidens were kidnapped by orcs from the Forest of Darkness. This man saved them and has stayed here ever since. But did he save them alone? It was like that. He went against the orcs alone. This is impossible, even considering that he is Madaka, the commander thought. Even if he gathered all the knights, it would be impossible to save the village maidens. But they say that he went against the orcs and also saved them. The knight asked his name. And the guy called himself Karma. The other soldiers did not like this treatment of their master. They demanded to address him properly. The headman tried to calm them down by saying that the guy had just begun to learn their language. The commander ordered to remove the weapons. The village headman was right. Although his actions are rather rude, he understood that the guy still did not know how to behave. It was rumored that whenever the Madaka came down from the mountains, they were praised for their fighting skills. The commander invited him to fight alongside them, promising to pay generously. He didn't seem to understand what the soldier was talking about. He turned around, looking at Milla. She spoke to him in her own language, but he still did not understand. He managed to make out some of the words, but he asked her what it meant. The girl just spread her hands, trying to explain to him what that warrior meant. It seems that now he understood what was meant. The guy shouted that he hated fighting. He was asked to fight, but why should he do it? That means killing people. He doesn't mind killing monsters and beasts, but why should he join someone else's war to do this to humans? On this he ended and announced that he was leaving the village. The girl got in his way, begging me not to leave. The guy thanked her for 2 months of care, but now he had to leave. The girl started crying. The commander seemed strange what he heard. The language spoken by Madaka. But how could he leave her if she was in love with him? Oh, already these Medaka. Like heartless, said the knight. But still, he wasn't about to let him go. This angered the guy. Why couldn't he leave? Because he is a free man. The soldier explained that this entire territory is the domain of the Baron. Since he ate food grown in this territory, he now belongs to the Baron, so he is also required to fight in this war. This seemed too much to one of the soldiers. He reprimanded the Grand Master. He was beside himself with such an act. Frightened, the warrior simply stepped back, pretending not to say anything. The Medaka are known for their strength and stubbornness, but he has also heard that they are completely loyal to those they obey. If you beat him and subdue him, he will be a very useful soldier. It was impossible to miss the chance. The guy repeated once again that he refused and was leaving this village. But the Grand Master was not going to allow this. He demanded to obey orders. The guy didn't understand why he had to do this. He wasn't going to obey. It seems that the commander had no other choice. He took out his sword, pointing it at the guy. And he was going to force him to obey, telling his men to give him a sword. One of the warriors took out his sword, throwing it at the boy's feet. Does he want to fight him? Karma thought. The knight wanted to see what he was capable of. This irritated the young man a little. But he quickly calmed down and exhaled. The guy agreed, but said that he would not use the sword. He will take his weapon. The knight didn't mind. He immediately drew his sling. The Grand Master watched this with interest. He did not understand what kind of weapon it was. The guy loaded the projectile. Warriors only watched in surprise from the sidelines. Was he going to fight Grandmaster Stone? This is ridiculous. He spun his weapon and they both prepared for battle. The knight still couldn't figure out what this strange weapon was. He has never heard of Medaka before, which uses something similar to this. The commander shouted that the savage could not fool him with his strange tricks. Let's see what you can do. Spinning his weapon harder, he fired a rock straight at his opponent. In the blink of an eye, his sword flew away. The knight fell to the ground. His people did not expect such an outcome. The Grand Master lay on the ground with a large dent in his armor from the impact. The boy immediately turned around and started to run away. The commander ordered to seize him. It was impossible to lose this Medaka. The soldiers immediately chased after him. And Milla just stood aside, and watched with emotion what was happening. It looks like he really is Medaka, the commander thought. What was this weapon? Vidin's castle. Chiani reported on what happened. This arrangement of affairs did not suit him. The knight apologized, saying that he was very ashamed. He did not understand how the Grandmaster was defeated by some kind of stone. And all these knights let one man get away. The warrior took all the blame, justifying himself that the savage had used a strange weapon. The Lord's advisor noticed that Medaka had killed the sword master in the past. Grandmaster level was lower, so his defeat is not something to be ashamed of. But to the Lord, these were just legends. And even in that legend, the savages defeated the master of the sword in a group, and not in a one-on-one battle. But this case was different. Their Grandmaster returned in disgrace, defeated by some stone. The old man asked to look at his armor. With a simple stone, it did damage to his armor and was even able to break his bones. He didn't even use a crossbow. Isn't this amazing? He asked the Lord. He calmed down a little and agreed with the advisor. There's no way a stone could damage armor like that. They searched his room after he fled. And found one item. The elder took this device in his hands. Pressed the button. A beam of light emerged from this item. The Lord took it for magic. The elder explained that this magic is not like a fireball, nor is it a scroll with fire magic sealed in it. All he did was press the bulge and light came out of it. It is also noteworthy that this light is not hot. This man had an object as strange as this one. Also, he had a weapon capable of damaging such armor. There must be something they didn't know about him. But what didn't they know? The elder suggested that Madaka might have found an ancient dungeon. It is impossible to explain in any other way how that person got such an artifact or that strange weapon. He couldn't believe Madaka was civilized enough to do something like that. The Lord imagined that there might be other treasures in that dungeon. They asked the villagers and they said that he came to see what the outside world looked like. If that was true, he wouldn't go back because of what happened. He will take advantage of the time that he has and show up again only when he considers it necessary. This will be your chance to capture it. The Lord approved this idea. She gave orders to her men to prevent him from escaping again. The Grand Master swore on his honor that this time they would definitely catch him. Despite everything. Soon the people of the Lord. They searched all over the forest. The guy was watching them from the trees. He thought that they would not pursue him so deep into the forest. Karma didn't know what to do. Should he cross the forest and go somewhere else? But do not underestimate the size of the forest, he could get lost and be unable to get out. And he was sure that when the army was replenished with new conscripts and the time came for their march, they would stop searching. And until that time, he will sit out, after which he will escape. The sun has already set. He continued to sit on the tree and wait. Dawn has begun. The soldiers continued their search again. Then night again. The guy looked at the village from afar. And already in the morning. From behind the walls came a whole detachment in size, reminiscent of an army. As Karma expected, they stopped looking for him and began to leave the village. Now he could leave the forest. Mentally, he thanked the villagers for everything. He was very sorry that he had to leave without saying goodbye to Milla. Out of nowhere, a crossbow bolt flew at him. It hit right next to his head. It was an ambush. Those people were waiting for him. Seeing the crossbow, the guy was alert. The Grand Master appeared Chiani, saying that the guy ran away all the time like a little rat, but now he finally showed himself. But this time, he won't run away. The guy realized that this was a trap and they were deliberately waiting for him to lower his guard. The knight ordered him to surrender, but if he did not. Without listening to his words, the guy immediately jumped back onto the tree. The commander gave the command to shoot at him. He was amazed by his ability to jump. The crossbowman began to fire. The guy quickly ran away from them, jumping from branch to branch. He noticed that one of the arrows was about to hit him. He managed to dodge. But he stumbled. And flew down. Falling to the ground. They immediately tried to throw a net on him. But he managed to jump up and take out his dagger. With one move, he cut the net in two. One of the soldiers could not believe his eyes, he managed to cut the iron net with a dagger. He warned the others that this man knew how to use mana. The other soldiers were scared when they heard these words. Someone tried to use hold magic. The spell worked, immobilizing the guy's movements. A magician named Conrad managed to catch him. And he ordered to seize him. Karma couldn't move. He tried to understand who this person is he a magician? The sorcerer was furious why everyone was standing and looking at him. He ordered them to hasten to seize the savage. The soldiers immediately obeyed the order. The guy tried to gather all his strength and break out of this spell. He managed to break the magic and free himself. The sorcerer was shocked, because this is impossible. How could he free himself from the spell with brute force? That hour he turned around and started to run away. The mage stood bewildered. How can this be possible? He freed himself using only energy, without any magic or scrolls. How could this even happen? Ahead of him was another squad of soldiers. They were about to stop him, but he jumped up. He climbed up the branch again and began to run through the trees. The guy knew that this battle would last forever if he tried to fight all of them. First you need to get out of here. The commander ordered not to kill him, but to aim at his legs so that he could not escape. Many arrows flew after him. One of them hit him in the right leg. And he fell to the ground. Soldiers ran up to him with nets. They didn't throw one at him. And then a few more, making sure that he couldn't cut through it. The soldiers leaned on him so that he could not move. The commander compared him to a wild animal and asked if he calmed down at least a little. There is a person who wanted to meet him. The Grand Master invited him to go with him if he did not want to die. Soon they took him to the Lord's castle. Lord Vidin was at a loss as to how he was able to free himself from the spell. It looks like the guy was truly extraordinary. He was kneeling in front of him, with his hands tied. The Lord showed him the strange artifact they found in his room. And tried to find out where he found it. The guy replied that he brought it from home. And why does the Lord ask this? These words infuriated him. It's not possible that Madaka could do something like that. He must have brought it from an ancient dungeon. But the guy explained that there are many such things in his house. The Lord did not believe him. Could savages be civilized enough to do such a thing? The sorcerer thought that the guy would not lie after coming here. They need to get better at this. He handed the weapon to the master, which broke the Grand Master's shoulder. He couldn't believe he could destroy the armor with something like that. He didn't even know how to use it. The Lord said that he would not believe in the possibility of defeating his servant with such a weapon until he saw it with his own eyes. And he demanded to show what he was capable of. A target with an iron breastplate was placed in front of him. With one throw and an accurate hit, he deformed it. They thought it was impossible. The armor was so easily destroyed by the pitiful stone. The Lord invited him to swear allegiance, in exchange for a generous reward. The guy refused, naming Lord Pachukai. The Lord was in a daze. In their language, it meant bastard. Vidin was furious, grabbing his sword. The mage stopped him. This man was able to break his spell with brute force alone. They could learn a lot from this person. The Lord ordered the commander to place him in solitary confinement. Don't let anyone get close to the guy. And give him enough food to keep him breathing. He planned to use a brainwashing spell when he returned from the campaign. A little later, he was taken to the dungeon. The wound on his leg was getting worse. He felt as if he would soon die of a fever. But at the same time he was cold. He began to meditate, concentrating as much as possible on his wound. His leg was throbbing, but the dizziness was proof that the leg was recovering. He must regulate his ki through meditation to heal wounds and speed up regeneration. In this way, he could get rid of the bad blood and purify it. They brought him supper, 1 loaf of bread. There were 3 loaves in front. And noticing this, he realized that he had been unconscious all day. The guy was not hungry, but he needed to eat to recover. The body must be healthy to keep the heart healthy, and that is the only way to keep the mind. After eating, he began to study. To keep yourself in shape. He could not even do hundreds of push-ups, although when he was in the forest, he could do as many as 500. But it was impossible to give up. 6 months have passed. He continued to meditate and study hard every day. Until at one point I felt something. He could see what was happening around him with his eyes closed. From such an ability, he was not weakly frightened. He tried to understand what it was. Was it something like X-ray vision? He had heard that supernatural powers could be obtained by mastering meditation. Apparently this is true. For the last 6 months, he has resisted loneliness, hunger, and cold in this cell, through meditation, to reach this level. But he couldn't be here anymore. It was time to get out of here. Looks like it's time for one thing. He was lucky they didn't confiscate it because they thought it was a piece of wood. With his new ability, he was able to test the structure of the castle. He opened his knife and slipped it into the gap between the door and the wall. It worked. It was thin enough to slip through the crack. He began to concentrate his energy, trying to cut the lock. It was necessary to focus all your ki on the edge of the blade, hoping it will work. In the end, the knife cut through the door lock. He succeeded and the door opened. Finally, he could get out of this cursed place. The guards noticed that the prisoner had escaped. They chased him. The guy tried to remember where the exit was. But the soldiers surrounded him. He had been in darkness for so long that his eyes could not get used to the light. He concentrated. And I was able to see these people even when my eyes were closed, but I did not quite understand what was happening. Is this also the power of meditation? He was able to lay down a few guards. And I was going to deal with the rest. They didn't understand how he managed to do it. He could see them, feel their movements even with his eyes closed. The guy could also see their weak spot. One of the guards tried to hit him. But the guy was able to strike ahead of the curve. Even if his eyes were closed, he could feel who will attack and how. He punched another one in the body. But it didn't work. This huge guard grabbed him and lifted him above him. He insisted that these weak blows weren't enough to knock him out. The guy understood that he would be dragged back to the cage if they grabbed him. And he wasn't about to let it happen. It was impossible to retreat. He stabbed him in his weak spot. The guard grabbed his neck. Thanks to this, he was able to escape. The thug fell to the floor. His eyes had adjusted a bit to the light, now he could open them. He looked at that guard. This time it wasn't an orc. He killed a real person. Other guards appeared around the corner. He needs to get out of this place. You can save your regrets until he can get out of here. At this time Lord Vitten was amusing himself. He returned with a victory once again. And it should have been well celebrated on this day. The girls congratulated him on his victory. He boasted that he had won all 3 battles, so he deserved congratulations. He told the girl to fill his mug to the top, he wanted to get drunk today. The more he thought about joining Prince Isola, the more it seemed like an excellent decision. It was a chance to expand the territory and climb higher. Finally, he will be able to get out of this village and replace those wooden mugs with sparkling bronze. You just have to wait and everyone will see it. His time will come soon. He was going to have fun with his girls. But one of the servants ran into his chambers, saying that they had problems. He escaped. Were they talking about a savage? The servant reported that he beat all the guards and got out of the castle. The Lord was furious. A detachment of knights immediately went to look for him. They must find him. No one can return home until he is caught. Night has already fallen. The soldiers were looking for him, holding torches in their hands. Among them were even Sari with dogs. There was no way they could catch his trail. The guards were furious with these searches. They wanted to teach him a lesson when they found him. One of the warriors suggested that the search be stopped that night. It was too dark, and the dogs were also scared because the area was full of animals. The best idea was to continue searching during the day. The Lord was against it, they should capture him no matter what. And those who say they can't do it will be locked up with him. Their master was very stubborn. The soldier obediently followed his order, saying that he would continue the search. This savage spoiled his mood from victory. He was going to torture him when he caught him until he was on the verge of death and forced him into submission. The boy was hiding near them. They were about 300 paces away and couldn't see him using torches. But he could feel them and their every move. They were desperately looking for him. He saw the Lord. He was the one who locked him up despite the fact that he was innocent. All this is happening because of him. He did not want to kill anyone, but if his survival depended on it, then he would do it. He kept repeating to himself the same words about the Lord. Karma was sure that if he killed him, the rest would surrender. Vidin sat on his horse without suspecting anything. All of a sudden, a projectile hit him. He hit a branch. And she collapsed right in his path. The horse got scared. And she threw off her rider. The guards immediately ran up to him, asking if everything was okay. The Lord had a panic. He did not understand what it was, where it came from and who did it. Due to the fact that the guy was in prison for too long, his abilities have become much worse. I had to try again. He must finish him before the soldiers come closer. The dog sensed something. The soldiers were also released from the leashes. The rope of his sling began to break. He was in a hurry when he did it, so she could not stand the promotion. In his mind, he begged her to hold on a little longer. You need to use your ki to strengthen the rope. He managed to do it. Ki flows in the sling. The Lord came to his senses. He did not understand what was happening, but ordered everyone to hurry up and find him. Thanks to the concentration of energy, the guy could destroy it with one hit. Then he fired another projectile, hoping that this time he would definitely not miss. The projectile flew out at such a high speed that it knocked down a thick branch in its path. The Lord noticed this, but it was already too late. The shell hit him right in the chest. And he fell to the ground. The Grand Master has alerted everyone that their master has been attacked. He lay on the ground unconscious. He ordered the others to hurry up and help him. After such a throw, the guy was free to leave. This time the Lord was very lucky. Alone, he was able to deal with 3 dogs that rushed to his trail. Meanwhile, Kaiga's troops were marching through the forest. He was thirsty. He began to ask at the top of his voice, "Who has water?" Other knights approached him and asked to be quiet. And what is he going to do if the beasts come and attack them again? He angrily replied that he was using more than his voice to attract them. They heard some movement not far from you. There was a rustle in the bushes. Lord Barlow thought they were demonic beasts and ordered the people to take up defensive positions. The soldiers lined up, pointing their spears. A paw appeared from the bushes. It was just a pack of small cats. The soldiers were very wary. These animals did not express any danger. They were approaching the soldiers. Approaching, one of them was frightened. He hit the cat with a spear, but he jumped. Get on his spear. And rushed at the warrior. His mouth opened, and huge fangs appeared from it. He grabbed the soldier's shoulder. The spearmen couldn't do anything about it. They attacked the others and they tried to fight back. Someone cut them down with confidence. And someone just asked for help. One of the commanders cut the cat that attacked him in half. He turned to the magician, demanding to use the spell. This girl hesitated and did nothing. One of the cats approached her. But that warrior was able to protect her. He told her to come to her senses. The man understood that she had no combat experience, but she could be killed by opening like this. Lord Kaiga came up behind her and grabbed her by the head. He threw her face down on the ground. The master was furious. Didn't she see those animals coming here? What good is a mage who can't cast a spell? Others, seeing this picture, tried to calm him down. But he grabbed her by the hair, asking how she could stand still and do nothing. After all, they promised that they would protect her, so let her hurry to use her magic. Two cats attacked the Lord from behind. He grabbed one of his men and covered himself with it like a human shield. Then he struck with his sword those vile beasts that dared to attack him. That warrior fell to the ground, showing no signs of life. That's how they were going to protect her. The other knights were beside themselves with such an act. But Lord Barlow asked to refrain. They don't have time to fight each other. The warrior was still furious. The Lord assured the girl that they would protect her when she cast the spell, even if it meant sacrificing everyone here. So she had better do her job or he would throw her to the demonic beasts to be eaten. She looked at Halbert's lifeless body. He always took care of her. The girl obediently complied with the order of the Lord, promising that he would use the spell as he wished, and give it his all. She began to conjure, speaking incomprehensible words, and pointing his staff towards the animals. She should focus on the spell. Say a few more words. The spell was ready. Fire wall. A bright light illuminated the battlefield. The monsters were on fire. The flash blinded the other soldiers. But that wasn't enough, the flames would die out too soon. She was still in the process of learning the fifth circle of magic. This could be difficult for her. But she was going to do it anyway, even if it meant she had to strain. Then she used a double spell. And again the fiery wall. The monsters couldn't get through it. And they started to retreat. Mag dropped to her knees, wasting too much energy. The Lord praised her for her good work, but told her to be quick next time. He had to spend the perfect mercenary because of her. The girl thought he was sick in the head. Brent approached him asking if mercenaries were things for him. Don't mercenaries sell their lives for money? They bought their lives so they could do whatever they wanted with them. These words angered the mercenary commander. If he thought so, it means that the contract is terminated. From this place, everyone will go their own way. On whose orders to terminate the contract? Kaiga was beside himself. The Lord's men approached the mercenary commander asking how dare he be rude to the Lord when he himself is a pathetic mercenary. If he is a mercenary, then he must act accordingly. But Brent couldn't work with someone he simply couldn't trust. This is how mercenaries operate. He ordered everyone to get ready. From that moment on their team leaves the expedition. His men followed orders. Lord Kaiga warned him about what happens to soldiers who disobey their commander on the battlefield. He ordered one of his men to teach him a lesson. The knights drew their weapons. Just like the mercenaries, the carnage is about to begin. Lord Barlow ordered everyone to stop. He asked Kaiga who is the leader of this expedition. And he pointed to it. Barlow was glad that he understood this and demanded that he stop showing off and causing problems. But he insisted that the mercenaries had crossed the line. But the commander ordered him to shut up, saying that he was an ordinary member of this expedition and he had nothing to say here. He just silently gritted his teeth. One of the warriors made a comment about the harsh attitude towards Kaiga. But he only fairly answered that he should follow his orders. He did not understand why the knight ignored his orders and listened to the orders of that young viscount. If he keeps talking like that, Barlow will let the people know what happened here. He was sure that their political rivals would be excited when they found out what had happened here. The knight apologized, saying that he would be more courteous in the future. This suited Lord Barlow quite well. The Viscount did not like that he interfered with his every move. The troops continued to march. The Lord apologized to the mercenary commander. But he remarked that it was not his fault. He couldn't blame him. The Lord was really ashamed. He asked how things were on the front line. The soldier replied that there was no cause for alarm. It was getting dark, the troops needed to set up camp. Something caught the attention of one of the warriors. Huge orange eyes looked at him from behind the bushes. A huge panther immediately rushed at him, dropped him to the ground, and she began to gnaw while the others fled. A monkey appeared behind one of the soldiers. She grabbed his head and twisted her neck in one motion. The soldiers were in a panic and began to scatter. Brent ordered everyone to stick together. One by one they will all die here. He grabbed one of his soldiers, ordering him to raise his weapon and fight. You need to calm down to keep your sanity in order to survive. It was more important for a warrior to stay alive than to earn money. The monsters continued to attack. Barlow ordered the Knights of the Golden Ram to rescue these people. But Kaiga refused, justifying this by saying that if they break the line, everyone here will die. They won't help because they need to maintain the number of knights they have. But how could he say such things when people were dying before his eyes? He no longer listened to Barlow's orders, ordering the knights to stand around him and hold their positions. This pissed off the Lord. But he asked to understand that all this was in order to prevent their extermination. Barlow turned around. And I saw how the monkey kidnaps their magician. She just held out her hand for help.